I think there was some making out that happened. But yeah, I think I had to excuse myself when I was making out with Emily and I had to just like puke.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories that they created there, and the people that they used to know. Sean Huang is a Taiwanese American designer, educator, and podcaster. He grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and had what he describes as a typical middle American upbringing. In the late 90s, as a teenager, he spent 2 summers in Paris, France, on a study abroad program. It was here that he got to dip his toes in the sea of sexual Yeah, okay, that didn't work. But what I am trying to say is that he got an opportunity to explore his identity and figure out who he was away from his everyday life. And one of the gay bars where he got to do that was the wonderfully named Le Queen. We talk all about being relegated to the sidekick role by the boy that you fancy, random encounters with men whose language you might not speak, but you know what I'm saying, and kinda accidentally taking part in a foursome with a number of strangers.
Especially in my teens and early 20s. I was definitely one of those gay boys who was friends only with girls.
Oh,
And
samesies.
yeah. So they were like the cool, fashionable girls. I remember there was one girl who, kind of this rich American girl who bragged about how her father sent her away to Paris every summer since she was like 15 or something. She was one of those like, tragic rich girls who had parents who would throw money at her but weren't super loving and stuff. So she acted as like she knew the city and she knew the nightlife and, we're like 19 years old or whatever. So I think I just followed her for a little bit around to different places because she also spoke better French than a lot of us. And so there was a little bit of that dynamic of anybody who knows a little bit more than anybody else kind of became the de facto expert.
Yeah, because I mean, especially with France as well, when you go there, everyone's like, oh, make sure that you speak French to people because otherwise they're going to be really rude to you and they're going to spit in your face. So it's kind of nice to let someone else do all of that, right?
Yeah. And certainly, we're talking about 22, 23 years ago now, where even in touristy areas, there was not a whole lot of English spoken or I think it's very different today. Like I've been to France much more recently, and even when you try to speak French, sometimes with your Uber driver or whatever, they want to practice their English with you. So I think that's changed over the years, but certainly back then that was the case. You just had to make do with bad French and hope for the best.
Follow someone who knew a little bit more than you.
Yeah.
And so those clubs that you went to with her, I'm presuming they were straight.
Some were straight. I think I ended up at Le Queen with her one night and a couple other people from our program. I think it was like gay night one of the nights of the week, but it was very much a mixed crowd at that point. There were a lot of straight people who went there. During my Paris trips, I didn't go to like exclusively gay places or more sort of hardcore gay places in that sense. It was very much a nightclub that happened to be gay, but had a lot of straight people as well.
Oh, damn. I was expecting today I was going to hear all about your sexual awakening in the city of Paris.
Oh, there was
Free
that
ticket.
too. We can.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, cool. You lead the way. Tell me all about it.
Yeah. So then this American girl, let's just call her Emily.
Okay.
We went to Le Queen one night with a couple other people from our program, and honestly, first part of the evening was kind of a blur. It was, it's a big cavernous underground nightclub on the Champs-Élysées. I think it's closed now, but you stood in line, there was a bouncer, then you walked down these stairs, and then it was just like dark, right? And they had different rooms and stuff. One night, and this is like towards the beginning of the program, like we had arrived, I think we had a day or two to just get settled in before like orientation or anything like this. So this is really like starting Paris with a bang. There's like me and Emily and some other people who we kind of lost in the course of the evening, I think. But we met this French couple who were like older. I guess when you're like 19, like everybody's older. But they're probably maybe in their early 30s, maybe older. I don't know. But it was, a French straight couple or swinger couple, I guess.
Ooh.
And I don't remember the woman's name, but I do remember the guy's name is Serge. And I remember that because it was like, oh, Serge, like Serge Gainsbourg. That was like, and so they just started buying us shots of things. And then, like, fast forward a little bit, we ended up leaving the club with them and then ending up at their apartments. It was me, Emily, and then the French couple. And that kind of turned into like this attempted foursome. But like at this point, I was just super drunk and not really like, it was like, I think there was some making out that happened. But yeah, I think I had to excuse myself when I was making out with Emily and I had to just like puke and like, and then by then it was
Wait. So did you know that they were
yeah.
propositioning you? Like, did you know this was happening, or were you just being naive?
I was just kind of going with the flow. I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like we're hanging out and we're meeting these French people who are taking us back to their apartment. And I don't know if I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I was kind of okay with it too. I was like, oh, this is kind of exciting. I didn't really have much sexual experience, very limited with both men and women at this point at 19. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And so I was kind of going along with it. But yeah, then one thing led to another.
And then you threw up.
I threw up. And then by then it was like dawn. So we kind of excused ourselves. And I think like Emily was less into it than me. Like she was kind of into it, but she wasn't so into Serge. And I was like, oh, this is novel enough for me. But yeah, it was dawn. I was like throwing up. And so we had to like take the metro back to our dorm. We had orientation the next day. I think I was like still throwing up like along the way back home. And then we made it just in time for orientation. So I think like we didn't have like proper classes that day, but it was the like, welcome to the program kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was at least like an hour or so of just people talking about all of this stuff. And so I had to like excuse myself at some point during that orientation to throw up some more and then just kind of like crashed after that and slept it off. But that was like starting Paris with a bang.
And what did this do to your relationship with Emily? Did you just like avoid each other from there on out?
We kind of avoided each other, but it wasn't that big of a program. I think there was only like 30 or 40 people. So even if you weren't in the same section of French class, you would still see people in the hallways or in the dorms. She ultimately started dating some guy in our dorm during the program. And so there was that kind of like weirdness there because I think maybe he found out about what had happened and like, he did this sort of like macho American guy thing. And then there's a funny addendum to this story as well. So I ended up changing universities and I transferred to Harvard. So I moved to Boston. And so this is like probably 2-3 years after this. Like this was towards the end of university at this point. And I ran into Emily, we'll call her Emily, at a party. And I ended up making out with one of her friends who's like a guy. And we like exchanged phone numbers and all of that. And then after that, I like saw Emily. And so we had like an awkward sort of like, oh, how have you been kind of conversation. But then the guy never ended up calling me back, or I think I like called him once and he either it was true and just really tragic, or he just needed an extreme way of like getting out of seeing me again. But he told me that his dad had died. Like I think I like called him like maybe the next day or something. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, my dad died and we can't deal with this right now. And so we never really talked again.
But no one would lie about that, right?
Yeah, you'd think you wouldn't need to go so extreme. So
yeah.
and again, it's just one of those memories that I remember, not so much making out with the guy and like him saying his dad died, but because Emily was there and I think he was friends with her at Boston University. So it was like, that was the last time I saw Emily.
And so what happened then? Was it just an awkward like, oh, hey, really nice to see you. We must keep in touch and then scurrying away type situation? Or did you like promise to keep in touch through MySpace or Facebook or something?
No, and I mean, this is the pre-social media era. I guess maybe MySpace existed, but it wasn't like Facebook where we're just on it all the time, or Instagram or something like that. So no, I think it was just like, oh, how have you been? And I didn't run into her until like towards the end of the night at that Harvard party. So I was like, okay, well, this is super awkward because I was just like making out with your friend in like I think it was like in somebody's dorm room where it was like a suite, right? So there's like multiple bedrooms, and so I was like in the bedroom that they were using as the coat room, right? And so like, it was just kind of this shocking juxtaposition. It was almost like seeing a ghost from your past.
We need to like collectively, like as a society, come up with a word or a sentence or an eyebrow movement or something that like both people can use in those situations and just like come clean about it, because it happens all the time, right? Like when you're with someone who
Yeah.
you don't want to be talking to and you're just like, fuck, I wish the world would swallow me up. And if you just had this one thing that you could both do and then like nod at each other and disappear, then that would be brilliant.
Right. Or it's like, do you just pretend that you don't know each other? Or it was like, it wasn't that big of a party, right? So it's like, it was more just the total shock value of like, oh, like your person from my past who I associate with Paris. What are you doing here in Boston? And you're friends with this guy that I just made out with.
So do you ever do that? Would you just like blank someone?
Um, I don't think I've done that like in a party situation, especially when it's like so small, you can't really avoid somebody. But certainly in New York, like you'll see people from the past and you're just like, I'm just going to walk to the other side of the street or just pretend like I didn't see them and hope they didn't see me.
I think I've stopped doing it. Like I did used to do it. Like obviously in London, you see a lot of people that you know, and you just kind of don't want to talk to them, and you feel minging. And so but now I just smile and I nod and I carry on and don't engage in conversation. But the expert tip that I will give you is that if you do see someone that you don't want to talk to and you think that they've clocked you, just start talking to yourself, because then they will assume that you're so caught up in your own world and that you're so like busy in your head that they just won't talk to you.
Fair enough. Yeah. You know, I actually do have that now. I've been temporarily living in this small town during COVID, and we definitely have a neighbor who's like the crazy neighbor you want to avoid, because if you stop and talk to him, he tells like all of these offensive stories of like things he's done to teenage girls when he was a teenage boy. And this man's like in his 50s, and it's just like, this is really gross. I don't really want to hear about this. And so now I'll just wave. It's the kind of small town where like if you don't wave at people, you're seen as super rude, right? So I'll just wave. But when I go out for walks, like I always have my headphones in and I'm like listening to a podcast, or I pretend I'm on a phone call, so, you know, hey, and then I just keep going because it's like I don't want to get roped into this thing. You know, he's one of those, I guess, lonely middle-aged guys who lives alone with his dog, and I think he just really wants to talk to people, but he's always so offensive when he does. So it's just like, okay.
Oh, I hate that. I hate when you're stuck in a conversation with someone and you're like, is it really worth the energy of challenging what this person's saying, or should I just smile and nod and then try and leave as soon as possible?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so I mean, hopefully he's not listening to this, but back to Paris.
Okay.
So that was your one sexual experience there.
Yeah, I think. Well,
I mean, we probably can't call it a sexual experience because it didn't quite go all the way, but
yeah, it wasn't like a fully consummated sexual experience. There's another one where there was this guy, Alex, who was like the only other like openly gay person in our dorm. And he was like a couple years older, just like, you know, this is the time when like Abercrombie and Fitch was like really big in the US. So he kind of was that type, right, of like handsome, hunky, white American guy.
and so did that kind of look do it for you?
In some ways, I was like both attracted and intimidated by that, because I was very awkward. I grew up in a very religious family, and I was also just like a nerdy kid for most of high school. And so I hadn't really sort of found myself, I think, as a sexual being or as somebody who was dating or anything like that. Like I had never been in a relationship at that point either. And so, yeah, Alex was like so confident. I remember he tried to like, there was this Spanish guy in our class who we weren't sure about, right? Was he like just Spanish? Was he gay? And like Alex tried to out him by like just dropping these little hints. Like one day, I think the Spanish guy was saying how he was an exchange student in the US, which is why he spoke English so well. And it was in somewhere really random, like Idaho or Montana or somewhere that I haven't even been to. And he was saying that people would ask him after saying he was from Madrid, people would ask him, what part of Mexico is that? And stuff like that. And then Alex, I think, just changed the subject. It's like, oh, Madrid, are there a lot of gay people there? And just to see what the Spanish guy would say, and it was like, whoa, okay, like you're really, really digging there. And I think Alex started like kind of seeing this guy that he had met in Amsterdam. Like he did a weekend trip to Amsterdam and just met this guy or something. And so he was telling me about that.
So wait, what happened with this Spanish guy? Did anything come of that? Did he ever answer that question?
He didn't. I think he just sort of like laughed a little bit uncomfortably. This is like late 90s. I think it was still just like, okay, I think he like saw the bait but didn't go for it.
Okay. So you never found out?
No. I think this is more just like an anecdote for like giving you a portrait of Alex.
Yeah.
Who's like, I think I LinkedIn stalked him the other day. He's like, has some sort of business empire in Texas now or something. But yeah, so fast forward, like I think definitely had a crush on Alex. It was like, okay, but he's just like almost like unattainable. Mm-hmm. He just treated me as like his sidekick in a way. But then there was a time where like Alex and I sort of were drinking in his dorm room and like started hooking up. Like definitely there's like some clothes off kind of stuff. And then his like roommate walked in, which like put a kibosh on that as well. So there was like, it was definitely a summer of like starting of things that never really fully consummated. And then we also got a little awkward and didn't really talk about it.
Oh, brilliant. That's the teenage experience, right? Just bury it down and pretend it never happened. And so we need to talk about La Queen. Let's talk about La Queen. What was special about it?
I think for me, it was like my first proper nightclub experience. I guess I was underage to do that in the States before I went to Paris. And so it was just I guess there's the story I can tell now 20 plus years later about Emily and Serge and that French couple. But I think it was just like a rite of passage of like, okay, this is my first nightclub and could go out dancing and drink gin and tonics or whatever. Yeah.
And so what was the feeling then of being in Paris and being away from home and like striking out on your own for the first time?
I thought it was exhilarating. As I said before, I grew up in a religious family and a conservative part of the US, like in middle America. And so it was just so different. There were people on the streets. You didn't have to drive everywhere in the suburbs like where I grew up. And there were just different kinds of people who could be who they were. I remember, I think I was definitely discovering like what my fashion look was going to be. And so we went shopping once. I bought these like Pierre Cardin branded, like shiny jeans. So they were like blue, but like shiny material. And so that became part of my club look.
Became your identity, surely.
Yeah. I had these like raver kid sneakers that had these like faux spikes on them. And so it's kind of like, experimenting with different things there. So I think Paris was good for that, like trying different things that I didn't really have the experience to try on.
But you didn't like get a beret and a string of garlic, did you?
No, it wasn't like a sort of Emily in Paris kind of situation.
Hang on, is that why we're calling her Emily?
Drops it. Yeah, because I've just made the connection.
Have you watched it? I haven't watched it. I've just heard how mindless it is.
I have. I kind of hate watched it, but it was like one of those shows that is so dumb it's good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm not judging you. I'm absolutely not judging you.
You're welcome to judge. My partner definitely judged me for watching it. I think it very much is an American fantasy version of Paris, and like you can definitely see the Sex and the City connection too, of just this like very unrealistic, like white woman looking for love kind of story. But I was entertained.
See, I thought that the most unrealistic bit of it was that her career accelerates really fast and she becomes like the manager or something. I would hate that. I would just hate watch it for that. So anyway, we're not here to talk about Emily. We're here to talk about you. So
Yeah.
let's find out a bit more about you. So where were you on your like coming out journey at this point? Like, had you come out to your friends and your
Yeah.
family? Like, where were you?
I had not come out to my family, but I was also like in high school, I was involved in orchestra. And like I played cello and piano. I sometimes played piano for the theater department for the school plays and things like that. And so I was like around theater kids. And so I was like out as bi in high school. There was like a few other gay or bi kids in my high school. So among my close friend group, it was like just kind of a non-issue. But in the wider world, in Arizona in the late 90s, it
Mm.
was still like, even if people knew, it wasn't like something as open as today. So I like knew I liked boys. I kind of liked girls as well. Like I'd made out with girls before, and I was like, okay, like I'm kind of open to this, but I think I liked boys more. But it was still very much an abstraction before going to Paris.
So did you view Paris as a way of like exploring that more, or was it just not something that you thought much of?
Um, I don't know if it was super conscious. I think it was like more of an unconscious thing of like, okay, I'm going there because I wanted to try to learn French and just experience living in a different country for a short amount of time and just to break out and to be independent. But I think the sexual discovery part was almost like it wasn't like fully top of mind. I think it was more just like okay, I'm a teenager and I need to figure this out. I don't think I had like a plan or a strategy or anything like that. I just like put myself in situations where things happened and it was more just like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. I don't have like, as they say, like I didn't have any game. Like I had no idea what I was doing.
Sorry, I'm making it sound like it's something that you need to like methodically plan rather than just letting the universe do its thing. But I just kind of
Yeah.
remember, like for myself, being in such a hurry to grow up and experience everything that there was to experience. And I'm just like, I didn't feel as though I was
Yeah.
going to be this fully realized person until I'd done everything on this list of things to do.
Yeah. I think also given the time, like it was before any of these apps existed. I think there were like websites you could go on, but it wasn't like we were online all the time, right? So you could like maybe meet somebody online, but you would like send a message and then next time you were online, you would respond to that and you were just essentially like pen
Yeah, yeah,
pals,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But my French wasn't good enough to have those sort of like long drawn out online conversations anyway. And so really it was like if anything was going to happen, I guess it was going to happen in real life. So in some ways it's like a blessing to almost be like the last generation to have that experience. I don't know what it's like for young people today, but in some ways it's like, okay, well, if you have everything on your app, like maybe it's just easier or you can be more specific of like, this is what I like, this is what I want, this is what I want to experience.
Yeah, and like I'm never really sure whether or not it's a good or a bad thing. Like you can be so specific now about what it is that you like and what you're looking for, which is, it's great if you've got like a specific kink or a fetish that's not common, but like it also means that it kind of closes you off to trying different things with different types of people and letting like chance just
Mhm.
play a bit of a role in your exploration. Like, people
Mhm.
are so quick to now put labels on themselves like, oh, hey, I'm a hairy bisexual bear who only wants dom pansexual twinks between the ages
Yeah,
of
I agree.
20
I
and
think
30.
maybe with more labels, you're still stuck in the world of labels versus more open-ended identification about that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. But like having said that at the same time, I'm just about to completely contradict myself. So sorry about that. But I know that when I was growing up, there were all of these guys who were like, oh, I don't believe in labels. I don't want to put a label on things. Maybe I'm gay. Maybe I'm bi. And it felt kind of less like a fluidity of identity and more like an internalized homophobia.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that's still a phenomenon now, but it was like almost safer to be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna be bi or questioning um, but like there was something so definitive about
Mm.
gay. Um, Whereas like I guess being more fluid, especially for like for girls, for women, it was like maybe like it was almost like a chic thing to be like, oh, I'm a girl who also kisses other girls, but I'm gonna date a guy kind of thing. Whereas for me, it was like, oh, I'm just kind of figuring things out.
And so, did anyone like? Okay, so I know this question is going to be a little bit of a weird question to ask, and I might end up sounding a bit douchey. So I'm going to say all of this now to protect myself. So sorry.
Oh, no worries.
The, did anyone like when you decided to come out as bi, was there anyone that just like refused to believe it, that was just like, nah, you're gay?
No, I mean, I know that that's a common thing, but I don't really remember that happening at
Oh,
all.
oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So that
Oh,
was lovely.
thank
Yeah.
you, theater kids.
In my small bubble of theater kids in Arizona. Yeah,
Thank you
it
for
was
not
okay.
traumatizing Lee
Yeah.
Sean. Right. Okay. So you said that you went to Paris over 2 years. Do you remember like any differences between those two trips?
Let's see. There was, I don't remember which of these trips this was. There was another like experience in Paris where I was just like walking around and some guy like tried to pick me up. Like, he like, we made momentary eye contact and then he like followed me for a little bit and I just didn't really know what to do with this. It was just like, okay, is he like was he an escort? Was he just picking me up and wanted to hook up? I was still kind of virginal after all of these sort of attempted hookups that didn't like fully uh, consummate, right? And so we ended up going into one of these like bar tabac kind of places to get like a drink, like a coffee or a beer or something. Like I remember he bought me a beer, and then we were talking, and he just seemed kind of sketchy because he claimed to be Italian, and like I don't really speak Italian, but I knew a few words. But then he was like kind of mixing up some words in different languages, and I was like, what, like. As we were trying to communicate, so it's like, are you really Italian or is this just an act? He wanted to like go to some porn theater or something to hook up or something, but then I just kind of declined. I thanked him for the drink, and then I was like out of there.
Oh,
And I think it was just like, yeah, he was cute and stuff like that, but I think it was just like way too scary for me at that point. It was like, okay, I see some maybe red flags. It was the first time that like some stranger had shown interest in me, like, and this was like in the middle of the afternoon kind of situation. I was like, oh, like, so it was both sort of exhilarating, but it's like I didn't want to go fully through with it then. It was just like, it was like too much.
like dipping your toe in the water and then running back to shore.
Yeah.
I had something similar happen to me once when I was like the first time I ever went to Barcelona, and I was just like, oh, so young and naive, and I just had no idea what was going on. I did not clock what was going on until years later when suddenly I was like, ah, yeah, he was a sex worker. This guy, when I was just coming out of my hotel, he just approached me and just started talking to me in Catalan and just kind of trying to schmooze me. And I was like, I didn't know what's going on. I have no idea. And then he got a bit frustrated with me and started going, hombre, el hombre, and then like smacking his hands together. And I was still just like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you said.
Yeah.
And he must have spent like 10 minutes talking to me and trying to like convince me to do something, to go on some adventure with him. But I just did not figure it out quick
Wow.
enough, and he gave up and ended up buggering off. But yeah, I do love those kind of lovely little misadventures that you get up to when you're in a foreign country and you just look kind of gormless and gullible to strangers.
Yeah, speaking of hombre, like just another kind of side funny story. I was in Brazil for work. This is much more recently, like maybe 9, 10 years ago. And I was, my coworkers were staying in one place and I was staying with a friend who I knew in Brazil, like in a different neighborhood. So they got out of the taxi. I was the last one left with the driver. And we drove by this neighborhood that had a lot of like trans sex workers, essentially. It was like, who appeared as women. And I just remember the driver saying to me, son homens, like it's like son hombres in Spanish, right? But the Portuguese version. And I was like, oh, thank you for letting me know. Like I definitely knew before, but like he was saying this to me like it was some sort of public service announcement in case I was like confused that they might be women or something.
Oh, I thought he was going to grab your hand and put it in his crotch like most cab drivers. Right. So let's get back to that question about the difference. So did you notice that whether there was any difference between that first year in the city and the second time around?
I mean, I was like 1 year older, I guess, and I felt a little bit more comfortable in the city, just knowing like some of the neighborhoods and things like that. But it's definitely like a later bloomer. I had to like wasn't until like the end of university that I had really figured stuff out, or I don't think I'd fully figured stuff out, but where I was just more actualized in that way. So I think I was still relatively shy and timid. Still hadn't like dated anybody that second time around. Um, in some ways, I became the Emily, like without the annoying part, right? But it's like, okay, I did know a little bit more than other people because I had been there the previous year, the previous summer. And so there was a little bit of that, but not that much because I still, my French was still awful at that point.
And so if you could go back in time and have a conversation with Lee Sean on the day after he'd almost had a foursome with Serge and Emily and the woman whose name you can't remember who was Serge's partner, and he is sitting on the side of the curb. He is feeling sorry for himself. He's hungover. He's about to throw up again. What advice would you give him?
Pace yourself and don't drink so much. I think now that I just drink so much less now in my ripe old age of 40, I think there's ways to have fun, be in the moment, be a little bit wild, but like you don't need to drink as much, I think, to have fun. And in some ways, if like the moment comes, you're more able to enjoy the moment. It's just that advice, and just like take it as like learning, because maybe 20 something years later, you'll tell the story on a podcast. I don't know. Especially in your like late teens, early 20s, like all of these experiences are so formative, even if it's like not amazing, right? But that it like, you have to figure out what you want, what you like, and all of these sort of things. So it's still worth it to have these awkward experiences.
Can I just sidebar really quickly? You were talking before about at that time in college, you were using drink a lot, using alcohol a lot, and that you were also quite shy. Was alcohol a way of overcoming that shyness?
I think so, because it was just like something to do, right? It's like hard to have sustained, deep conversation like in the club when the music is so loud, but you can like drink and you can take shots with people. And I think it was a way of dealing with that. And then also like not really speaking French in those days. I could really only interact on a deep level with like the other Americans I was with. I think that's the other advice too. It's like, if you really want to learn French, like don't go on a program with all Americans.
And don't hang out with that Italian guy either. He's not going to teach you any French.
Yeah, totally. Avoid the hustlers. But also maybe like telling Alex that I fancy him sooner or something like that, rather than just being the sidekick, right?
Would you really do that?
I think 40-year-old Lee Sean might do that, because it's like, okay, like you're only there for the summer anyway, and like if it's not reciprocated, it's like you're still gonna be in class, and then you don't ever have to see this person again. It was already awkward with Emily, right? So it's like I'd rather
just alienate everyone on that course.
Like, isn't it? It's like rather like regret the things that I've done than that I haven't done. So yeah, maybe I would have put myself out there more in that sense.
Yeah, and you could have been like some business tycoon in Texas by now.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories of Le Queen or clubbing from your own queer scene that you want to share? Well, if you do, please get in touch. I want to create the biggest online record of people's memories and stories of queer clubbing. Go to lostspacespodcast.com and find the section Share a Lost Space and tell me all about what you got up to. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as Lost Spaces Pod. Find out more about Lee Sean by following him on Instagram and Twitter at Lee Sean, or listen to his podcast, AIGA Design Podcast, which is available to stream on all good podcast platforms. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I have been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, which is called Well Grown Boys, and is playing underneath my talking right this very instant on all good streaming platforms. If you liked this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on your podcast platform, or just told people who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen too. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.